is people don't understand when an HMO actually becomes active.
Yeah.
So an HMO becomes active when two people who are unrelated are sharing with a third person.
So just to clarify, if you've got two lodgers, it's two people, a couple who are not related, who are in a relationship, but they have a lodger, is that then classed as three unrelated people?
That's two households,
yeah.
Three people. So there's two sets of unrelated people. Now that's fine in your own house.
Yeah.
But it's not fine if you are a tenant with a lodger. That becomes a house in multiple occupation. Now, the first problem there is if you're in an area that is what they call Article 4, Article 4 removes the permitted development right for somebody to turn a property into a shared house. So that's three people from two unrelated households. So it could be a couple and their friend. But because they're not related by blood or sexual union, now a house in multiple occupation has been formed. So two things trigger. There's been what's known as a change of use under planning. And if it's a house under permitted development, that's okay. And there's something called Article 4 exists. But if it's a flat cannot change from C3 residential use to HMO C4 use without planning permission.
Right.
So there's tons of flats in multiple occupation in central London and most cities that are in breach of planning.
Yeah.
Now let's just stick with the planning part first of all. It's not against the law to breach planning, but if the council catch you and say stop it and you ignore them, then it is a criminal offence and they will go for the proceeds of crime. And this is where you see rent being repaid of hundreds of thousands of pounds because it's been going on for so long.
But you can continue until you get a cease and desist, more or less, because you've not technically broken the law until you ignore the council's warning.
Yeah. And so what they do is they send you out a planning contravention notice. And if you don't fill that in, it's £1,000.
Yeah.
Now, what we say is call us at that point, because what a planning contravention notice is it's your confession.
Yeah.
They're asking you to confess your sins without a priest, without a confessional, and with no absolution or getting away with it. So most people fill those things in and then they get a fine. We would say don't fill it in. Let us fix the problem for you.
Yeah.
And quite often what we do is we don't answer. We call them and we say you're in error, and we get the person to change everything because they don't have any evidence.
Because I think this is the biggest thing that kind of shocked me in our previous conversations, is that people they're scared, and so they go to the council and they go, "Oh, I'm really sorry. It was because of this. It was because of this and this." And the council's just, okay, and they're making notes. And this is basically performing a case against you. You're trying to be as helpful as you can because you're scared and you're nervous, and it's like you just need to shut up immediately. And get you guys involved, because the more you talk, the more they're going to catch you out.
Absolutely. So that's just the planning side. Now let's get on to the licensing side.
Yeah.
Under the law, under the Housing Act, which is where licensing comes under, as soon as you create that HMO, you have to comply with what's known as the management regulations. And what number 3 on those regulations is to put a sign up saying who the manager is and how to contact them 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
The fines are generally £500 for that problem if you don't have it there. The second thing is if you're in what's known as an additional licensing area, most additional licensing areas kick in at 3 people. And this is the biggest area where we see that people do not spend any time checking the council website to see if they need a license.
Yeah.
And because they don't have a license, the fines are generally between £2,500 and £12,500 for not having that license. And then they stack offences on top of that because you haven't got fire safety, you haven't kept the common parts right, you haven't got the notices up, the garden isn't tidy, and people quite regularly have got fines. Well, if you're in trouble with the council, you're looking at fines generally between 15 and 30,000. And if you're really, really not maintaining or managing or keeping involved, it could be like we've seen a couple of times, 115, 120,000.
Wow. I mean, that's got to be a bad case. It has to be, right?
In some cases, yes. Sometimes they're just managing to stack a bunch of things on top, because it's old-fashioned guys. I mean, the landlords that they're generally, the landlords are 55 to 70 in years. They generally come from a generation when none of this existed. You left your tenants alone. Unless they complained, you didn't go near them.
Yeah.
And of course, the councils are targeting these landlords and taking their pensions in fines, because they've got to do the work anyway. But the tenant, I'll be quite frank, most of them are happy living in their place. They're happy doing what they're doing. And we've got one in Camden currently. The tenant's told the council that she does not want heating in her HMO room. And they said, well, after 47 years, we do have to give her consideration. 47 years as a tenant, she's never had heating. She doesn't want it. And so the council's going to give into that.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So go on.
Well, that's the way it is. But in talking about lots of people, lots of investors, the latest thing that people are doing is because of coronavirus, they haven't been able to buy properties with vacant possession. And the problem with not having vacant possession is you're inheriting the history of the property and the history of the tenancy.
Yeah. So
we had a case last week, and it is a tragic case. A letting agent was given a property by an owner of a property. He bought the property. It had a shop downstairs and 2 flats above. He bought it. The tenants wouldn't move out because of coronavirus. So they were advised by a solicitor, we'll regulate their tenancies, get an agent involved. So the agent gave them ASTs, took on the management, went to do an inspection, couldn't get access to all areas, and said, well, it's coronavirus, don't worry about it. What turned out was happening was one of the tenants had a camping gas cylinder cooker.
Yeah.
There was an explosion.
Oh, gosh.
2 people died.
Oh.
The new owner and the agent and the directors of the agency and the directors of the new owner's company each have had masses of civil penalties. Wow. And to say the fines, if you want to know the value of a life, the fines are over £500,000.
Unbelievable. And so, so the tenant was using the stove for cooking, I'm guessing, right?
Well, we don't know. He could have had a drugs factory, but because the agent didn't check the property, who knows what happened? But the fire brigade's investigated. Everybody's investigated, and you have 6 months before they take any action. And they waited until there's 183 days in half a year. They issued the notices on the 182nd day.
Oh, yeah.
And these guys are devastated. But as I keep saying to them, guys, how much would you pay to have one of your legs chopped off or one of your arms chopped off and live with it for the rest of your life? And in comparison, 2 people's lives have been lost and nobody's going to jail. Nobody's got manslaughter charges. The fire brigade haven't gone to. They accept your version of the story. But it is frightening. So when it comes down to fire regulations, if you are a landlord, you have a duty of care to inspect. So if you've got an HMO, check it every month. If you've got a buy-to-let, go in quarterly now, because you just don't know what they're doing. And if your tenant decides to put tin foil over an alarm or decides to bring a friend in, who gets in trouble? Not the tenants. They've got shelter to help them, and the Citizens Advice Bureau to say the landlord's a terrible person. The landlord gets the fine. The landlord gets the trouble, and the cost to fight it is very, very high.
So what if you've got an issue, for example, especially with right now, we're kind of, 65% of the way through the pandemic. I don't know. Nobody knows. But we're getting through it. I think we're over the hump, hopefully, and so on. What if a tenant says, no, I don't want you coming in. I'm scared of coronavirus. They might be a high-risk tenant, for example. Not a tenant, but a high-risk person. And you can't get access. How do you even operate on something like that, do you think?
The key here is that you have to record everything that you're doing meticulously. Every phone call. I would advise getting a recorder of your phone calls when you call people and they refuse. Emails, to follow up every phone call with an email and get a response. Because you just don't know. Now, the only reasonable excuse is that you try to do everything that you can do, And what many people do is they call the local authority thinking the local authority is going to help them. Well, that's like calling the court and saying, "Can you help me break the law?" Or calling the police and saying, "I just committed murder. Should I call it in?" You just don't do it. The last person you want to call is the council. They're looking for every little thing they can. And I don't want to scare people, but you wouldn't drive a car if you knew all the rules and the regulations that you don't know. The same way as being a landlord. But the key point is, when you hear somebody else is getting done, you go, the police are sitting on that corner and they catch us out. The police are here. And I don't know what it's like in southern Spain now, but many, many years ago, if they were going to tow your car away, you gave them 500 pesetas and your car was dropped off the crane and off you drove. You know, the policeman was happy, you were happy. It doesn't work like that in Britain. I'm sure it doesn't work like that in Spain anymore.
No.
You know, but those days are gone of the let's have a chat with the planning officer, let's have a chat with the
friendly chat.
Yeah, so, let's have a chat and let him off, and he'll fix it. And he'll fix it. And when we're down the pub, of course, we'll have a meal together, and I'll get to know your wife, and my wife, and our kids go to school together. It's a fantasy for the TV now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other thing as well is that the councils now can keep some of these fines, right?
Yep. So that's very simple. If they prosecute you in the court, then the fines go to the central government. And if they don't prosecute you, they give you a civil penalty, they get to keep all of the money. So as you can imagine, they're going down this route as an alternative to prosecution, which brings me on to a very interesting case that happened in Suffolk recently. The gentleman came to us about 18 months ago. He said to me, we did the first representation. We put those into the council. I began to realize the council wasn't letting go because this guy was pleading absolute and complete ignorance that his house was an HMO. They weren't letting go, and he was beginning to go, this is going to cost a lot of money. And I said, yeah, it's looking like it is because there's something missing here. I don't know what it is yet. He said, well, listen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and deal with this myself. He called me about 7 months later when he was on his way into the magistrate's court.
Eesh.
I'm like, hold on. You're going to the magistrate's court. He said, Des, when I was talking to you at first, you were scaring me with what you were telling me. He said, and I started to think he's over-exaggerating and it can't be that bad. He says, as I'm walking into court, I owe you an apology. I need to call you and tell you I actually have come to realize how bad this is. He said, and I've used a local solicitor and he doesn't seem to know what he's doing. He said, so I don't know what's going to happen in court today. Well, it got adjourned and he didn't call me back. He continued with the solicitor because he felt comfortable with it. It turned out that not only was the house an HMO, that the tenants had turned into an HMO, they had people sleeping under the stairs in any little space they could. There were 17 people there when the council went. But they didn't just take the council didn't go on their own. They took something called the Gang Masters Squad, which is all about trafficking of gangs for foreign workers. They brought the managers from the factory where apparently all these people worked, and that's where the tip-off came from. So it turned out he didn't get a very big fine because the courts generally give lower fines than the civil penalties, but he is over £10,000 out of pocket, and he's now got a criminal record for an HMO that he let out as a buy-to-let to one family who decided to change everything. And he hadn't realised when he went round, he didn't go and check the whole house. He just left them to it. And they were in every little cubby hole. They were in every little room. All the rooms that had locks on them, but you couldn't see the lock from the outside, so they were only on the inside. And the cooker, if he'd got into the kitchen that last time when he did something with the boiler, because the boiler wasn't in the kitchen, he would have seen that the cooker had broken. So they got another cooker and they plugged it into the 13-amp socket.
Oh, gosh. So,
people will do anything. Now, needless to say, these were factory workers. They were low-level pay. He should have spotted it when the payment for the payment for the rent didn't come from the same people every time.
Yeah.
So lots of little signs. But when we looked at the bank statements, I said, "There's something not right here. There's more to this." But he didn't want to. he didn't want to admit to himself that he'd made an error. And of course, he fought and he fought and he fought. So they went for prosecution because they thought he was party to it.
Yeah.
So he's not very happy, but it could have been dealt with by civil penalties if we'd gone through it and he'd gone through things with us at the beginning. So we can't help everybody. We can only help those who want to be helped.
Yeah.
And we have pulled, I will tell you now, we've pulled some real strokes with landlords for the council. We've done some really, really clever stuff. And we've got a landlord in Salford. I had to look at the wall to see where he's based. In Salford, he's got 17 properties. The council started enforcement on 2 of them. We spoke to them and he said, look, could you hold the enforcement? We want to look at the other 15. If you don't enforce on those, we'll allow you to enforce everything on those 2. We did a deal. And it was in the near Salford and Manchester area. So there's 2 things to be done. So we did a deal and the council has kept good to its word, but the landlord has had to spend hundreds of thousands bringing the other 15 properties up to standard. So there are deals to be done, but they won't do them with the landlord directly because they don't trust them. If you get a firm involved, we didn't do any of the work. That's not what we do. But we did go and inspect. We did make the lists. We told them how to do it. And we did inspect afterwards. And the council has been around and seen all the other 15 houses. And what's pleasing for us is they say, since you got involved, things have improved and we're beginning to trust the landlord to manage himself again.
Very good. I think this is one of the difficulties right now. Landlords are getting squeezed every which way. There's new EIC, electrical installation certificates needed every 5 years, or electric checks. There's Section 24, which, where you're now paying tax based on your revenue, not based on your profit. So that's gone up. And yeah, sure, rents have definitely gone up, especially in the outer skirts right now because of the pandemic. Certainly in the city centre flats, mine have plummeted, 20%, I'd say, in the Leeds city centre, for example. And even now we've got a 1-bed. We're trying to squeeze that rent up and struggling to get the rent up. The tenants just given notice. But what's happening is that landlords are getting squeezed more and more and more. And that little bit of profit that they could make is either now going on tax or it's getting less and less. And so, and I found this, 22 years I've been in property. For the first 6 years, I had no money to spend on property refurbs and bringing them up to scratch. And now when I look back, I should have spent a lot more money bringing them up to scratch and so on, because we could have got top dollar rents. But that amount of money is getting smaller and smaller. And so landlords now are struggling to spend, fire doors are not cheap. Fire alarms are not cheap. Licensing's not cheap. You now got selective licensing. In Leeds, I think it's £860 split in 2, one on either side, one at the application, the other when it's granted. And just to get one of my 2-bed back-to-backs in Hare Hills, I think it cost about £2,500 because we didn't have fire alarm systems and the fire doors in, so we've put them in. And then other little bits pop up, like we had from the lounge to the kitchen was a round window. So we had to fill that up with bricks and replaster it because it's a fire hazard. Even though you used to have, those little holes in walls to serve food on, you can't have them anymore because it's a fire hazard. So it really does cost a lot of money. If you've got 10 back-to-backs in Hare Hills at £2,500 a pop, you need to find 25 grand. So then you've got that, then you've been squeezed with tax, and then you've got this, and then something else. So I can see a lot of landlords going, oh, I'll just hope I don't get caught. Obviously, licensing's coming through. That's not going to happen anymore. No,
and the tenants are in the right to rent guide. It is now explaining all of these things and explaining about licensing, explaining about rent repayment orders, explaining about how to get to the council. So you may as well invest the money. And I would say there are a lot of people with a lot of money sat doing nothing because there's no point. It's sitting in a bank. They will lend you the money. And if you're happy to give them a restriction over your property, many of them will lend that money to you for 10, 15, 20 years because they haven't got anything else to do with it. But what they would do is like to get a return on it. Yeah. And they want to know that you can't sell the property without repaying them. So I would borrow the money because, like many, they're having to borrow the money to pay the fines. Yeah, and absolutely. The hard part, and I would say it now, is if you don't invest now, get out because you're never going to do it. If you are someone who wants to live a lifestyle for the next 5 years in property, you've either got to have a lot of money or a good person as a benefit factor to you. Otherwise, just keep your head down, get your properties right. And if you're changing tenancies, factor in that you're going to have a 2-month void currently. And one of those months is going to be getting the decorators in, getting the carpenters in, and making sure they do things to the future standard. Because the fire doors right now, we got councils in London specifying fire doors and specifying things as if each HMO room is a flat.
Yeah.
And that's the level they want to go to. We are fighting back because, of course, it is masses of cost. But they don't come back quickly. So you're left in limbo, and they hope, well, while they're in limbo, they'll probably get on and do it anyway, which is what many landlords do. So, again, you can't control the price of petrol. You need to go there, so you've got to spend the money. It's the same with property today. The legislation it's like it's a need, the same as petrol's a need if you want to drive a petrol car today or a diesel car. Yeah, you just got to spend the money. And if you can't spend the money, and you don't want to spend the money, start selling off part of your portfolio, or bring a partner in who's got the money and has got a longer term view. If you're my age, you start divesting of things, or you start leaving them to your children and get them to take over. But what you don't do is just say, no, I'm not going to bother. You've definitely got to find a way of succession planning to make it move forward properly.
I agree. And I think there's something else as well. So I've been in property 22 years. I'm 48, so you can do the maths. And, going back when I was 26, first getting into it, loads of energy, loads of optimism. I've got this saying, if you're still excited by property, it's because you've not got enough yet. Because it soon starts to weigh you down. And then obviously there's a whole bunch of legislation coming in of brand new stuff. And you have no idea about, because it's just brand new. You've never seen it before. And I'm going through this now where we're slowly starting to move some of this stuff off onto other management agents, where I've managed it very successfully for the last 22 years. Even here in Spain for the last 7 or 8 years, we've managed it very successfully. But I'm just reaching that point where there's so much stuff coming through. And if we get it wrong, you're pretty screwed.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I lived out of the UK for 5 years in Mexico. And
nice.
Yeah, I had management in place from family, and they did everything that I needed them to do. But sometimes it was really, really tough because the tenants are telling you things that aren't true.
Yeah.
You're having to deal with it. You're saying, why am I spending this money? And the only way to do it now is you've got to have qualified agents, preferably ALA qualified. The regulation of property agents, which has been delayed but is coming, they need to be level 3, and the directors need to be level 4 qualified. They've got no excuse then. And as a landlord, I hate to tell you, they act for and on behalf of you in your name. So they will get the fine and you will get the fine as well. Yeah. So it's important they're doing the inspections. It's important they're giving you the reports. And I will say it now because many people think I'll go with the big boys. They've got the systems and processes. You're more likely to get in trouble if you go with a large nationwide company than a local person who understands your market, understands the roads, understands the regulations, and he's got his reputation and his business to lose, or she. Then they will do a better job for you, and you can question them. And of course, they're better known to the local council, so they know who to talk to when it comes to seeking advice without getting enforced upon. So very, very important. The local letting agent is now invaluable, but you do have to interview them and you do have to check that they know what they're doing.
So I know from our previous conversations that one of the biggest mistakes people make is leaving it too late to actually pick up the phone and speak to professionals like yourselves that can help them. If you've got a licensing issue with the council or a HMO license issue with the council, they just leave it too late, and then they open their mouths and the council's writing everything down using evidence against them and so on. At what point should people really be speaking to people like yourselves?
The moment they get an inkling there's a problem.
Yeah.
So if your tenant has called the council, call us. There's a letter coming. The other thing is, if the council come round and they don't get back in touch, don't chase them.
Yeah.
I had one yesterday. He chased them, so now they're doing something that they may have forgotten about. They've got 6 months to take action. If they don't do something in 6 months, you walk scot-free. That's actually the law of the UK.
I see. That's interesting. I didn't know that from a property point of view.
Yeah. So 6 months they've got to from the moment that they have evidence of the crime being committed. So they know you don't have an HMO license today being 19th of May. On the 18th of November, they've got to have served you notice that they're going to prosecute. Otherwise, the statute of limitations kicks in. And it's the same. It's the same with motoring offences and other offences as well.
Yeah.
They've got 6 months. Otherwise, you're scot-free. Do you want to be scot-free? Absolutely. Can you stop them? Well, as I said, they will wait until the 182nd day and then serve the notices. Many of them do. We've won many a case because they were out of time and they missed that they were out of time.
Yeah.
So
did they still try and enforce it, even though they knew they were out of time? Did they still try and enforce it, or does the judge just go, "Well, no"? Because
we have a way and a tone of making them realise they're not going to go any further.
Okay.
There is a way to talk to them. There is a way to deal with them. And I said this. I was with some people last week, and I said, if you're our age, Dan, you will remember when you were growing up the early reruns of things like the Sweeney, and you'll remember John Thor, who was Jack Regan.
Yeah.
Well, the thing with some councils is they're more like Jack Regan in the Sweeney, thug-like, you're all criminals, I'm going to treat you badly. And then you've got other councils where they're more like he was in Inspector Morse.
Yeah.
But the person we're expecting to meet is someone like Martin Shaw and Judge John Deed. That's what we're expecting from our council, a noble person, a person who's got stands for the law and will give you a fair trial. You've got every type of character. And my business partner, Phil Turtle, who deals with all the compliance, so he's in these training and professional development with the same types of people who work at the council. And the young enforcement officers, they're looking to how they can get money from you, whereas the old-fashioned environmental health officer is thinking about the safety of the tenant and how you can improve.
Yeah.
Now, while the environmental health officer will do a better job, he won't make money for the council. Now, if I wanted to start a business where I didn't need salespeople, but I could make more money by the more things they could find, I'd set up a council enforcement company.
Yeah.
But of course, you can't do that because only the council can do the enforcement. So for them, it is like a golden egg being laid. Everybody, you've got the tenants reporting. You can walk down a street and look at half the houses and just bang on the door. The tenants will let you in. You then enforce. The people don't know what they're doing. It's like a salesman making sales, and he doesn't even have to cherry pick. It's just everything in front of him is money. And
just a cash cow, isn't it?
It is a money tree. And then, of course, they feel obliged to tell the tenant that the landlord's in breach. And so the tenant says, oh, right, so I can get a rent repayment order. Yeah. And then you've got firms who just, that's all they do. They go after the money. There was one case we worked on last year. No, it's this year. It's called Fakara versus James, if anybody wants to look it up. Hannah James, she was a solicitor. She, through a property deal, she inherited a house. The house sorted out, there were some problems, but it was an HMO and it had existing tenancies. When she took it over, the tenants said they were moving out. On the day they moved out, she decided to move into the house. On the same day, they decided they wanted to move back in and that they hadn't left. They now went to the homeless officer and she found herself being charged with 3 rent repayment orders.
Oh, wow.
3. She can no longer act as a solicitor in property anymore. She eventually had to pay 1 rent repayment order, but it went to the upper tribunal and they said, no, you can't get it 3 times over. 1 for illegal eviction, 1 for harassment of tenants, and 1 for not having a license. All because she'd done a business deal with somebody, and part of that business deal was she got this house. So you can imagine that house and that business deal, she wished she'd never done it.
Yeah,
of course. So as an investor, back to vacant possession, it means everything. It really does. And that's why a solicitor will say to you, do whatever you can to get vacant possession. And currently, it's all on the tenant side.
This is one of the things I see, and it scares the living crap out of me, really, is you see these property experts gurus, okay, and I have a training course as well, 27 quid, as I'm sure you know, but we have these property gurus, and they're on stage and getting everyone happy clappy, you can do it, and rent to rent, and zero conversation around rules, regulations, evictions even. And I ask people, I go, have you gone on I did my training through, I think it was the RLA, very good training, how to evict a tenant, all that stuff, done it a couple of times because I kept forgetting. Brilliant training. And I said to people, have you done that training course? I go, no, I've not done anything. Can I do this? Can I do it? Like, why would you be in property and pay other gurus thousands of pounds for weekend training, and you don't have a first clue about how to evict a tenant, about licensing, and no fire doors? Well, I want to go buy my next deal, my next rent to rent. It's crazy. You're just setting yourself up, increasingly so with recent, in the last couple of years, with the way everything's got tightened up. You're literally setting yourself up to potentially fail, and not just fail in a small way. They want to be financially free, and they're going to lose everything, criminal records, fines. It does scare me. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Through our website is very easy, which is landlordsdefence.co.uk. That's defence with a C. But the other way is really, really simple, a very simple number, 0208 088 0788. And you'll get through to us. If we go on to Overflow, you might get a French message, because our Overflow staff are in France, but they are British and they speak. But unfortunately, the French telecom won't let them change the standard message. So we're getting some IP phones sent out to them. But you know how it is. But yeah, we've got highly experienced staff. We've got people who've worked in the councils. We know we know how the councils think. We know what their aims are. But the most important thing is, remember, if you go and do something wrong, like you run somebody over by accident in the road, would you call the police or a solicitor first? You wouldn't call the police. You'd go and get advice and then maybe turn yourself in. Or as an American Secret Serviceman told me, who worked in the UK in Hereford at the Secret Service Centre, and he was here protecting American servicemen under British law. And he told me very, very clearly, if a policeman knocks on your door and you didn't make the phone call for him to be there, he's not there for your benefit. No. I would say exactly the same with the council. If the council knock on your door for any reason that you didn't call them, they are not there for your benefit. Call somebody to help you, and Landlord's Defence are the people who can help you with that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. I'll let you get on with your, I'm sure, very busy day. But thank you very much, and we'll speak to you soon.
All right, Dan. Thanks so much. Cheers.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.